just gonna wait for Shlomo to join. I don't know if anyone saw the post, the story, but I was so excited. I was actually in Toronto today, and I got a chance to visit Shlomo's office, and my kids were with me, and actually, before he became a psychotherapist, oh, there he is. He used to teach my son breakdancing, so my son was so excited to see him. I'm just gonna add him to the log. Um, and they had a little reunion. It was very cute. Hi. I was just talking about our little visit today.
Oh yeah, that was fun.
Yeah. My son was talking about it the whole day.
Yeah, I'm glad he still remembers the moves.
Oh yeah, he did. It like stuck with him, right?
Yeah,
He even invented his own after.
yeah. He renamed all the moves that I taught him, which is great.
That's awesome. Yeah. So like he loved, and you know what? And I found you. I think I found you a lot. Like this is like well before you were in school. Like it was a while ago, right?
Yeah, like 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I thought it was so fascinating. That you had a homework club with breakdancing.
Yeah, I was combining tutoring and breakdancing. I love the breakdancing, and I always try to figure out like, how can I combine it to something that's educational or take something that's boring and make it more fun. So that's kind of what my new thing now is with psychotherapy. I've worked with a lot of kids, and kids don't like sitting still and doing, therapy. So it seems like a natural, logical progression,
Therapy's hard for everyone. So
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah. Maybe I'll teach adults as well.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll
Yeah,
get a nice
yeah,
group of guys coming to learn breakdancing.
yeah, yeah.
Good shtick for weddings.
It is. It is. It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get like a dozen of them. They could do a pyramid.
Exactly. Yeah, we can do that. Yeah.
All right. So let's. I guess we could just get started on anger management. We tried to
Okay.
get Adam Sandler to join us today,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah. So
he
are
didn't
we
respond.
doing we're doing the movie, or we're doing because I prepared two different notes just depending on where we're going. So yeah.
I mean, he didn't respond, but I did.
Ah,
We
okay.
actually did
Okay.
try. I'm not kidding. We
Oh
did
yeah.
try to
Okay.
get. Yeah, like I'm actually
Okay.
not kidding. Oh,
Okay. So if he does join in middle, I'm able to kind of segue very easily into that. So
okay,
we'll go
perfect.
with what I prepared before that, and we'll go from there.
Wait, did you practice the song though that they sing in the
Uh,
car, just in
I,
case?
I was I was hoping he'd join us and he could do it himself. So
Okay, perfect,
yeah,
perfect.
I can do dancing. I can't do singing. So yeah.
Shoshana, also from Project Proactive, is on there, and she said she's actually laughing out loud right now. Hope everyone
Great.
else is too.
Yeah.
Laughing's good for you.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so yeah, let's get started.
Okay, so I guess the topic for tonight is anger management. And there's lots of different ways we can start, but I thought maybe the easiest way to get started is by talking about who has issues with anger. So, I mean, do you have any thoughts about that?
Me? I mean, I definitely
Well,
have anger
yeah,
management issues. I mean,
yeah, that's right. Everyone has issues with anger, and that's kind of where I'm going with that. Everyone has issues with anger. You know, men have issues with anger. As you know, some of your lead up posts were showing how anger is kind of the classic emotion for men, and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that soon. Maybe. Okay, yeah, and women also experience anger, but usually won't experience anger in a different way than men, and that's something we'll get into as well. And then, if any parents are watching, it's possible that children have issues with anger as well. I'm not sure if anyone's found that. but occasionally, yeah. I mean, I have two kids. I have found that occasionally. I'm not sure if it's my thing. I mean, we were putting the kids to bed tonight, and we were talking about how we're not putting the kids to bed. We're just doing anger management. So, um, yeah. So it really is pretty universal.
Yeah, I
Um,
think so.
yeah, yeah. So so everyone experiences anger, but like I was saying, people experience it differently. And I work with a lot of men. That's just how it works. And a lot of men come in with anger issues, which there's almost this perception that men experience anger more. Um, and I don't know if that's actually true. From my experience, it's not that men experience anger more necessarily. It's just that the way men display anger is a lot more visual, a lot more expressive than the way women do. So women are often socialized not to display anger. That maybe displaying anger is a bad thing. If you look
Uh-oh.
at, yeah,
Someone
yeah.
could have told me.
Well, some women get that message, but it's definitely not the case that anger is just a men's issue. For a lot of men, anger comes out in a very expressive, could be explosive way. Could be yelling, could be throwing things, and more physical kind of ways of displaying anger. And for women, anger comes out in more, and again, these are very big generalizations, so to take them as you will. But can often come across more passive aggressive and what we call cold anger versus hot anger. So really, everyone experiences anger. Just the way it comes out is different depending on lots of different factors.
Oh, I think I mastered passive aggressive.
Yeah, that's well done.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
The
Yeah, and children in particular have a big issue with anger, as many parents have recognized, and a big reason behind that is because anger has a really big connection to language. So anger is a way of expressing feelings, expressing what's going on, and it's expressing needs. So there's a simple equation. If your needs are not met, anger follows. And in this world, needs are not met pretty often, right?
mm-hmm.
So as adults, we're hoping that adults can express that in a more adaptive way, by talking about it, by working through it. Children don't have the same language skills as adults, and so for children, what will happen a lot of the time is that their way of expressing that their needs are not being met is with anger. So the good news about that is that as children's language ability develops, anger does go down to some degree. So if anyone's struggling with children that are throwing tantrums, it does get better to some degree. The other piece of anger is anger, like I mentioned, is a language piece, and there's talking about that's verbal language. But anger is really a piece about emotional language. So for a lot of children and adults as well, the ability to express emotions is limited. To first of all to express what they're feeling, but also to even know what they're feeling. So children have a very limited language vocabulary, emotional language vocabulary, and they're often not able to express that this is what's going on for them. Like we would want our children to be able to say, "Oh, I'm feeling upset right now, and this is why I'm doing this." And instead, the child just hits you. So something that's really important is to help children develop their emotional language. And we'll talk a bit about some ways that you can do that later on, I guess, tonight. And the same emotional language issues comes up for adults. So adults usually master the verbal language piece, but the emotional language piece is often still lacking for adults. So being able to recognize what's inside, and then secondly, to be able to express that in a way that will help you get your needs met. And there's good ways, there's ways to do that. So the other piece about anger is, and I guess emotional language and emotional needs, is anger can often be thought of, and often but not always, anger can be thought of as a surface emotion. So if you think kind of like the tip of an iceberg. So anger is what's visible, what's popping up, but underneath that anger, there's all sorts of other feelings, whether be it anxiety, be it stress, worry, sadness, and anything like that. So what usually is expressed is the anger, but there's often lots of other things underneath that are really what should be expressed. And the unfortunate thing is that what gets expressed is the anger, but and usually what we're going back to that equation of unmet needs equals anger. What we want to get with anger is we want to get our needs met. The unfortunate thing is that usually anger doesn't get our needs met. So when we react to someone with anger, what normally happens is the person gets more distant, or the person moves away from us, or it usually doesn't end. So it doesn't end with us getting our needs met. So it's pretty unfortunate if what we're really feeling is sadness or isolation, or we had a hard day, and we're expressing anger. We're not going to get what we really need. Yeah. And the other piece about that is that, again, going back to that idea of anger being really connected to language, is there is an anger language. So when we're feeling angry and we start expressing ourselves, there's certain ways that we just start speaking. So for example, one example of that is, with anger, we start to use a lot of you statements. So, when we're feeling angry, it's, oh, you messed up, you didn't do this for me, you didn't understand. And it's all about the other person, and, getting into the blame game, which again, doesn't get us where we need to go. And if you contrast that with the kind of language you use when you're feeling, like, I guess, the emotions underneath anger, like, hurt or isolation, you can talk about saying, oh, the language that goes with that is I statements. Like, oh, I'm hurt. I had a bad day. I didn't do this the way I wanted to. And what happens then is we're more likely to get sympathy and get our needs met. So it's really unfortunate that what happens is we resort to anger. So that's kind of what this is about, to learn other ways to respond to that, and to really figure out what we need to get met. Right. So I guess any questions about that so far before?
That was very clear.
Okay.
I mean,
okay, great.
I don't have questions. Does anyone else? Somebody, Mo Weiss said he loves you. Is that he or she?
That's a cousin, Mo Weiss. Yeah. Okay. Love you too. Yeah. All right.
But if anyone has questions, feel free to send them in along the way.
Or we can do questions later as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll move on. So if we're talking about anger as being the tip of the iceberg and having needs underneath that anger that need to be met, one thing that's really important is to increase our awareness of those needs. So we need to know, what are we actually feeling, and what do we really need to get met. There's lots of different ways to increase awareness of your emotions. I'll just mention some quick ones, again, related to the idea of anger and being really connected to language. So something we can do is typically when we feel angry, the thoughts that go on in our brain are about anger sound like this: like I'm really angry. I'm super angry right now. I'm angry, and it's all about kind of like anger becomes us. Like we are the emotion of anger. So if we can shift our language around that, using different things like I'm feeling angry, or I'm noticing that I'm feeling angry, or language like I'm feeling angry and disappointed, that just helps us realize that anger is not really, that doesn't define us. It's not who we are. We are bigger than that experience, and there's other experiences going on as well. So it's really important for us to be able to go inside and try to sense what else is going on, so we can really take care of what has to be addressed, as opposed to just dealing with the surface anger. Now, if you have kids, how do we get kids to do this? Kids are not exactly going to start being like, oh, I'm noticing that I'm angry, and therefore I'm going to start behaving. So there are ways to help kids engage in that same process. And the way to do it is, as parents or teachers or any adults supporting children, what we want to do is we want to engage in that process of labeling the experience for our children. So if we suspect that our child is angry, but there's other things going on, such as they're tired, it's been a long day, maybe they're hungry, then we want to draw attention to that. So instead of saying like, oh, you're so angry, you're so upset, we want to start to pay attention to the fact that, oh, you're feeling hungry and you need some food. We want to just label that for our children. Now we don't want to start taking all experiences of our children's anger and saying, oh, you're feeling something else, oh, you're feeling this, but we want to draw their attention to the fact that there may be something else going on and just label that for them.
So how can you do that? If it's pretty it seems a lot easier to be able to access the real root of the.
Yeah.
It seems a lot easier than it actually is. I know I've tried.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different things that could be going. I mean, hangry is an easy one. Like, I mean, you like go get something to eat and that works. But what if? How could they access if the kid? I'll give you an example. One of my kids was having stomach pains and was like coming home from school with stomach pains and getting into trouble a lot more,
Right.
And so he was feeling anxious but he was getting angry in school, like how would you help him, like somebody access what the root of it is, the angriness?
You would want to kind of identify whatever's showing up the most. So if anxiety is showing up most and anger is coming out as part of that, you'd want to call that what it is, an anxiety experience. But there are times that, and this is where we're going to get to next, that anger is not just a surface emotion, it's really the experience. So I guess the point with this kind of intervention is when you suspect very strongly that something else is going on. And for me, I guess with my stage of children, having a 2-year-old who just, when we're an hour before bedtime, you just see what happens. You see the de-escalation, or having a child who is hungry, because you know that it's about time for him to eat and that he's starting to get hungry then. So you want to, in that moment, call it what it is, hunger, as opposed to anger. There are times when a child is just, anger is what's showing up most, and then we want to deal with that. Does that make sense? Does that fit?
Yeah. But
okay.
I was really talking about more of the nuances of the language, but I guess does that come with age?
So with age, it's definitely easier. But if you can't get exactly to the nuances, you can acknowledge that I am angry, and then doing that I am angry. You are feeling angry and something else. So maybe just drawing attention to the fact that something else may be going on as well that's contributing to this. That way, you're not invalidating the experience of anger, but you're also pointing out that something else may be contributing to why you're this angry right now.
Is it if you ask the kid, is there something else going on, and they're like, why can't I just be angry? I can't just be angry. Why is there always something going on?
Yeah. So that's what I was trying to say before, that you want to be careful not to overuse that, and if there could just be something, if all they're willing to own right now is the anger, then you can go with that. I wouldn't push it and try to convince the child that, oh, you're not angry, you're hungry. But I guess the idea is just to maybe raise the possibility that something else is going on. And if the child is going to shut down on that, I wouldn't force the issue.
That makes sense.
Okay. Anyways, yes. So that gets I guess to the next part about what if anger itself is just showing up, or what if anger is the primary experience that you're dealing with. So the first thing you want to do, and this applies, I guess, for yourself and for dealing with children, is you want to validate the experience of being angry. So kind of a knee-jerk reaction that we all have, and we do this to ourselves and we do this to kids, is to say things like calm down or relax. And I don't know, has anyone ever tried that? Why don't we try something? If anyone's ever tried that and you said calm down to your child, can you put like a emoji, like what emoji kind of comes next with your child? Why don't we just take a moment for that?
We will. We posted that thing like never in the history of telling
calming down.
To calm down. Has anyone ever calmed down?
Yeah. And that just has to do with just the way emotions work. Like if we are feeling angry, we're feeling angry. You can't just wish away a feeling, and can't just say that you shouldn't be angry. If the child's actually angry, or if you're actually feeling angry, then you are angry in that moment. And it's important to realize that there's nothing inherently wrong with feeling angry. You're allowed to feel upset. Mm-hmm. As an adult, you're allowed to feel upset. You're allowed to have all sorts of emotions. And as a child, the child's also allowed to have all sorts of emotions. What really matters, and this gets to the question of, I've been asked before, is anger bad? Because anger kind of gets this bad rap that it's a negative emotion. It's not something we should feel. But the truth is, anger can be a very adaptive emotion. It can help us change things when things need to be changed. So we don't want to shut down from that emotion. What we want to do, and what really matters more, is kind of what we do once that emotion shows up. So if anger is showing up, we want to be able to react in a way that's going to help us in the long term, as opposed to just going to the short term knee-jerk reaction of negative behavior. And that's the same thing for kids. We don't want to suggest to them that they can't feel angry, but what we want from them is we want them to, when anger is showing up, what are you going to do that's going to work out better for everyone? So what we're really targeting in, I guess, anger management situations, or anger management work, is what we call problem anger. So that's very simple, like anger that's coming out as a problem that's getting in the way of relationships. It's getting in the way of school, friends, whatever, however it's interfering. So when we're talking about problem anger, there's a couple different classic forms that it can take. So one of the most recognizable forms of problem anger is the explosive, expressive type, where we resort to yelling, screaming, maybe throwing things, or maybe just arguing. It's different ways for children, different ways for adults, and different people, but just the more expressive type. And that's usually pretty recognizable how that's a problem. Another form of expressing anger is the more passive-aggressive type, which is becoming more distant from someone, maybe giving the silent treatment to someone, and just kind of just closing off, and we're still being aggressive, but we're just not doing it in such an expressive way. So those forms of expressing anger can be problematic. And there's an additional form, which is, I've worked with a lot of people who, instead of getting expressive, they kind of say, okay, I don't want to be an angry person, so I'm just going to be completely passive. I'm going to just let the other person win everything. I'm not going to have any fights, no arguments. And then they just really keep all their anger inside themselves. So they just bottle up.
Resentful and
yeah. Right. And so so that leads to resentment. It leads to it impacts physical and mental health, and you're holding on to that anger, and it also comes out in our behavior in maybe more subtle ways, such as being more distant from someone or not wanting to talk to someone as much. And eventually, when we do that, when we bottle that anger up, it does eventually explode. It comes out. It does. You can keep it in, but it comes out eventually. So those are kind of the classic ways that anger comes out, and none of them are very helpful in the long term. To a certain degree, we'll all do them. We'll all engage in these things, and that's we're not talking about the occasional issues of anger over here. But we're talking about more if this is your default strategy, it may not be working for you. So that goes to the question of what is effective anger management. So what do we really want to see? Because I said before that feeling anger is not a problem. So what do we want to see from people when they feel angry? So there's a few different things we want to be able to see from people when they're effectively handling anger. So one thing we want to be able to see is we want people to get their needs met, right? Unmet needs leads to anger. We want people to get their needs met. And we want to teach them that a way that they can get their needs met more effectively is to use assertive language as opposed to going to the aggressive route or going to the passive route, this middle ground of assertive language. And we'll talk more about what that means in a moment, because there's lots of ideas of what being assertive means, and they're not always helpful. So spending some time on breaking that down will be important. We want people, in reality, anger is unmet needs. Sometimes our needs don't get met because that is the way of the world. So we want people to be able to take care of themselves when their needs are not met and not lose it, right? We want people to be able to handle it and give themselves what they really need in the moment, if things are not going the way they want. And we want people to also be able to learn how to pick their battles, to figure out when they need to work to take care of the needs, and when they maybe should let it go for the bigger picture.
That's a hard one.
Yeah, that is a hard one. What we're looking for is movement in the direction of becoming assertive. Like very often when we're talking about helping people become more assertive, we don't want them to go home the next day and just completely change who they are and completely become totally assertive, totally changing everything about themselves. We want people to pick things to work on and then let it go sometimes. So we're not talking about letting it go and not deciding that it's an issue, but we are talking about not making all your battles happen at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So
somebody just said I always just eat myself up all of the time.
Yeah. So depending on what's happening there, if you're not getting your needs met, you want to work on taking care of yourself and figuring that out. But to a certain extent, it might be important to figure out if there are needs of yours that have to be met, and how can you work on changing them? How can you work on getting them met in a way that will be helpful to you?
I just scrolled back, and there was a really good question, and we started talking about it, but Great Nick Girls asked, what if you don't know the root cause of your anger?
Yeah. You don't have to know necessarily the root cause of your anger unless the ways of working on your anger are not being effective. So, I guess this goes to like a question of even like what happens in therapy, because there are approaches where you need to go back in time. You need to go figure out when did these problems originate in childhood and all this kind of stuff. And to a certain extent that work can be important and helpful, but there's also approaches where if you just work on changing your behavior in the moment, in the present, then that's what really matters most. So it's not necessarily about figuring out the root cause of, where did this anger start, unless you're finding that the strategies that you're using to work on anger in the moment, like behavioral strategies, are not really working for you.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Yeah. Because like in my work with clients, there's a big question for me. Like when someone comes in, do we work on the behavioral picture, or do we go back into earlier things? And in general, I'll always start with the behavioral picture, and I won't go back unless I see a real reason to do that.
Yeah. Sometimes it could be like painful to go back, right?
Yeah. It can be painful. Sometimes necessary, but not always necessary.
So is it not necessary to develop like a more extensive emotional vocabulary if you have the proper tools?
Can you repeat the question?
So if you have proper tools, like anger management tools, is it less important to learn the nuances of the emotional vocabulary?
I guess it can and can't be. Like learning I guess the point I was making with learning the emotional vocabulary, the stuff that's going on, is that in itself is an anger management strategy, because you're recognizing that what I'm feeling right now is not all about the other person. It's not all about the situation here. It's about what else is going on inside me. And then the anger management strategy that you're using is self-care, taking care of what's going on inside, instead of going back and making the whole situation that's happening right now as if very often, I've heard this quote once, I forget where, but actually I don't remember what the quote is, but the idea is, yes, you're angry, but should you be this angry? Like a lot of times in situations, the situation makes sense that, someone will be upset, someone will be bothered, but then the reaction is way bigger than that, way bigger than what the situation calls for. Mm-hmm. So if that's what's happening, that's often a clue that, there's more going on here than just the situation. And maybe I need to, go to self-care. I need to figure out what else is bothering me.
Oh, so you're saying regular anger, you could just use regular strategies, but then when it's like a little bit more extreme, you kind of are like, okay, what's really going on?
That's definitely a clue.
Okay,
right?
So that makes sense. So regular anger, you don't really have to delve so deep into what's going on. You just
unless there's a very clear cause, like you're sleep, that you're sleep deprived, and you're reacting, with irritability and anger to everything. Then that's kind of like, oh, okay, so maybe not actually angry here. And I guess that also goes to the same idea. Like, if your anger is less about the situation and more about what you're feeling, then that's a clue.
Okay. Baby Crochet Clips had a question. Going back to hungry children, I'd be wary of pointing out their hunger when they're angry, because I don't want to give them the idea of turning to food when they feel strong emotions.
Right. That's a fair point. And again, that idea, I would only really use that tool if you suspect strongly that that's what's really going on. Because for children, there are times when they don't recognize that they're hungry. And if you know that it's been a while since your child's eaten, then that's a clue. Okay, maybe what's happening now, the reaction that's coming has more to do with the fact that they haven't eaten for 4 hours. And maybe eating is important here. But it's not, the suggestion is not that every time a child's angry, oh, here, go eat something. Because, that would be an unhealthy dynamic.
Well, that's I've seen that, oh, you're crying, here, eat this candy, I'll feel better. That's not what you're saying. You're saying
no.
that oh, let's be aware of when's the last time I've eaten. Oh, okay. Well, I forgot to eat breakfast this morning, so
Yeah,
maybe it's it's noon,
right.
and maybe it's because I haven't eaten anything all day,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So it's not reward. It's not like it's not rewarding bad behavior with food. Is that what you're saying, baby?
Yeah,
Crochet
yeah. It's
clips?
not.
Like,
It's not. It's definitely not about that. It's more about recognizing that what the reaction the child's having may be a hunger reaction instead of an anger reaction. It's not. It's not giving food when the child's angry. It's only.
right. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's important for kids to kind of learn to gauge their, and you're not like telling them to turn to food to solve a problem. You're telling
Yeah.
them that, well, there's certain basic necessities in life. Like you could be
Yeah.
thirsty, you could be hungry, you could be
Yeah.
tired, and you have
Yeah.
to become self-aware to know that that is the
Exactly.
cause.
It's all about building the child's emotional the child's awareness of their own needs. And a strategy like that, the younger a child is, the more something like that will be required, and the older a child is, the more you might get the response, "Oh, I'm actually really angry. Why are you telling me that I'm hungry?" So you want to use it when you have a strong reason to suspect that's what's going on, not as a way to just call the anger something else.
Well, actually, like funny that I was actually talking to my husband was it like last week or the week before, and he came home in like a little bit of a bad mood.
Okay.
Like, and,
Eat a sandwich.
yeah, and he's like he's not generally very grumpy person,
Okay.
but he did come home in a grumpy mood,
Right.
and like he was really not acting like himself. And then we got to talk, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And I take things personally, and I like,
Yeah.
oh, what happened? Like, oh, what did I do? What did I do to you? Like, it's my
Yeah.
fault. And I take everything personally. And then like we were talking, and he's like, you know what? I didn't really eat anything today.
Exactly.
So the day after, I called him on his way home from work, and I'm like, can you just stop and eat something before you go?
There you go. Yeah.
Because then I
Yeah.
like get all set off because I think it's my fault.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a really good point. Like, it takes two sides to to every fight, and if there's an argument that's happening, or someone's giving an angry response to you, kind of putting that in perspective, like, okay, maybe it's been a really long day for them, and this is what's going on. It's not about me, because you're right. When
That's
we take
hard.
it is hard.
Hard.
It is hard. Yeah.
Especially like,
And
you text your friend or something,
yeah.
and they don't respond, or they're just like, oh, don't have time for you, sorry. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, you're like,
We don't want that to become we don't want it to become the default, like, I guess, dynamic, okay, so someone has a hard day, so they're allowed to take it on you on the end of every day. We don't want that.
right.
But, I guess occasional anger, like, like you noticed your husband was acting funny, that kind of thing.
Right, but if it was happening more often and there wasn't a reason,
Then you'd want to, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess we were talking before about being assertive. So assertive is a word that sometimes gets confused or misunderstood. A lot of times people think assertive mean just speaking in a really strong, loud voice and like stating your demands. And that is not what we're talking about with assertive here. The way we define assertive response versus an aggressive response is aggression is all about getting your needs met while not respecting other people's needs. And assertive response is all about getting your needs met while respecting that other people have needs as well here. So you're getting, the focus is still on getting your needs met, but the idea is we have to keep in mind that there's another person here. There's another person that we're speaking to. Their reaction is going to depend on how I communicate to them. So it's all about that idea of of working on your needs while respecting other people's needs as well. And that goes back again to remember the language piece I mentioned before. You know, you statements tend to be more aggressive. It's all about the other person. It's all about blaming. And I statements is it's I have needs here. I would like my needs to be met. And it's about speaking about yourself and not putting it all on the other person.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one way to use assertive versus aggressive language. And we spoke about again, self-care. Self-care is super important. Again, there's certain conditions that are just associated with being more angry. Things like stress. We've mentioned hunger, sleep deprivation, being sick. When all these things are going on, we're just going to be more likely to get upset and react that way. So we want to make sure that we're taking care of those things. And we also want to know how to, when things are not going well, or when maybe the situation didn't end the way we wanted to, know how to take care of ourselves in that moment. So, we could go a very common response. I guess a very common thing that happens after something doesn't go our way is we tend to stew over it, to ruminate, and just get lost in our heads about how bad everything is, and that just builds up anger more and more. So we want to work on, maybe instead of doing that, like, okay, this situation didn't go the way I wanted it to. Maybe tomorrow or the next day we'll see if we can work on this in some other way. But for now, I'm going to just go read a book and just take care of myself for a bit, and that just can help us.
So what if somebody can't get, like, what if somebody feels hurt by somebody?
Yeah.
And they're it just like keeps playing over and over, even though they can't concentrate on reading, you know.
Yeah.
Like, I was just talking to somebody about that, and she was just saying,
Yeah.
I can't concentrate. It's like really like just like things were not she wasn't able to move out of her own head and even get to that point. So were there any tips or?
I mean, rumination is a whole topic in and of itself, but I guess something that's helpful. Rumination often disguises itself as problem solving. Like, we're getting lost in our head, and if we keep thinking of it, maybe we'll figure out a way out of the problem, and we'll figure out how to solve this. So you can track that. Like, if while you're ruminating, you're being led to a more productive direction, and you're coming up with great ideas and things to try, then okay, by all means, do it. But if you're kind of just caught in this worry loop or rumination loop, and you're just thinking about the event over and over and over again, and you're just feeling angrier, and nothing productive is happening, then all that's happening is you're hurting yourself in that moment. Mm-hmm. So we want to just work on getting some space in that. There's specific techniques that are and practices that are very helpful for dealing with rumination, such as mindfulness. Mindfulness is a great one for that. And even something that's also helpful with rumination is labeling your thoughts. So, like I mentioned before, the idea of like I am anger versus I am feeling angry. So it's the same kind of thing. Like having thoughts, you can use language like, oh, I'm having the thought that this, or I'm noticing that I'm having the thought that that's something else. And that gives you some distance. That can give you some distance and help you move on.
We had Bruchie Moskowitz, who's a therapist, she did, what's her topic? It was on shame. She was talking about, she said that when you're kind of in that state that you could, that you want to get curious about what's going on in your brain. And so like you should approach it with curiosity and be like, oh, I'm feeling this anger.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm pretty curious about why I'm feeling that anger, or where's that really coming from? Or she says I like that
Cool.
term, curious.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know.
and that goes that's like the same kind of idea almost, where instead of being your ruminative thoughts or being this anger, there's this you that's kind of looking at this anger, and that gives you some space to just to maybe not get carried away by it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, cool.
That's good.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah. So going back to I guess effective anger. So we want what's really helpful in I guess managing as a general anger management approach, um, is anger disguises itself as as being productive, as helping us get our needs met, and we need to be angry so we can um, stand up for our needs. We need to be angry so we can right this wrong or stuff like that. So like what we're saying with rumination, we want to just examine whether that's actually working. So when we're angry, is that actually getting us closer to the life we want, the kind of person we want to be, the kind of values we want to live by, or is that taking us away from that? So asking yourself, that's a pretty easy way to distinguish between like healthy anger and problem anger. Like, what is it actually doing for you? And if it's not taking you where you want to be going, what do you need to do differently?
So it's kind of like know what your values are and whether it's
Yeah,
getting getting you closer to those
yeah.
values.
Yeah, and that's a very big part of it. The therapeutic approach I use most frequently is acceptance and commitment therapy, which is a really big focus on helping people figure out exactly what they want to be about, and then you can look, is anger getting you there, or is anger behavior again? Oh, a second, just lost something. Okay,
Oh, so
yeah,
you're saying like the difference between anger behavior and anger,
yeah.
anger as a feeling.
Yeah. So, because I said before that, feeling angry is not necessarily a problem. It's more about what you do that matters more.
So your feeling of, but so are you saying that your feeling of anger is what's driving, like let's your feeling of anger or your acting of anger, is that getting you to your goal?
The acting of anger. So it's not looking at the feeling of anger. So it's there's this feeling of anger there, and when anger is showing up, what are you doing? And the default response for a lot of people will be things like aggression or arguing and stuff like that. And what we want to look at is that getting you where you want to get in terms of your values, in terms of your needs, and in terms of things like that. And if your behavior is not working, what do we need to change?
We have two questions.
Okay.
So what if the other person won't give you a little space?
They won't give you a little space in like after you're feeling angry. Like what's
Like space to be angry? Is that what you're saying?
okay.
Maybe like arm C23, if you could kind of like be more specific. And then Great Neck Girl asks, how do you respond to someone upset if telling them to calm down doesn't help? Telling them to calm down doesn't help. Don't do that.
Okay, yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah, yeah. So, and like, I guess that's a question of responding to an angry person, right? Because I don't have the comment in front of me. That's
Oh, you don't see it?
1 second. Yeah, I don't see it.
Oh, so she said how to respond
Okay, there it is.
on
Okay.
someone upset if telling them to calm down doesn't help.
Okay, yeah. Oh, yeah. I did want to get to that. Thank you. Okay, so we want to in the moment validate their experience. So first of all, we want to be able to have a line about, I guess, our own boundaries. If someone's like acting angry towards us and I guess is treating us disrespectfully, doesn't mean that we have to sit there and validate their feelings. But if someone is, they're upset, and let's say an adult first, and we'll talk about child because there's a little difference. You want to just let them know that you can. First of all, you understand their experience, and then you want to label. You want to show them that you understand their experience, and you can also like label the emotions going on for them. So if they're feeling upset, oh, you feel really upset right now. You feel really hurt, and just kind of be there with them as they are going through that experience. And someone's asking about not respecting your boundaries. We'll get there in a moment. And for children, this comes up a lot. Children get angry. How do we cope with that? How do we respond to that? So with children, we want to same kind of process. You want to show them that you understand what they're feeling and label their emotions there. For children, it's really important to label their emotions because that builds their emotional intelligence. And it builds their awareness of what they're feeling, and the more aware of what they're feeling, the more they're able to manage that, self-regulate. So we want to again be there with them, and if they're feeling angry, we want to allow them to go through that. Now, what happens when someone's being angry, and let's say a child's being angry and is just hitting you? We're not gonna just sit there and take that necessarily, and when an adult is doing the adult version of just of not respecting you, you don't have to sit there and take that and validate their feelings. So with a child, we want to if that's happening, we want to help them redirect to something else that is more what we want to see. So a child who's, let's say, getting angry and hitting you, we might move the child with like minimal attention, speaking very quietly, somewhere else where they can't hit you, and that would be for the moment. We're not gonna really be engaging with them, not gonna give them a whole lot of attention, and this really is a whole additional topic which my mother, Sarah Hannah Radcliffe, really covers super well in her book Better Behavior Now. Of how to deal with children when that's going on, how to help them redirect, how to help them do what you want to be seeing, and how to reinforce that. Again, it's called Better Behavior Now. It's available as an ebook from our website, and there's actually a print version being published in the next few months, I believe.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it's a great book. It's great because it's super short, so it's really, really practical. I highly recommend that. And my mother's watching, so got it. And for adults, we want to, in the moment, not take disrespectful behavior that's going on. And not engage with them in that moment. If they're not respecting our boundaries, not respecting us, we don't want to engage. You want to revisit that with them at a later point.
So you would say something like, I'm really not feeling comfortable with the way that you're talking to me right now. So why don't we give it some space, and then we'll regroup when you're feeling a little bit calmer. Yeah,
exactly. And maybe the other adult doesn't give you that space, and if that's what's happening, you might need to give yourself that space by going to another room or something like that, and then revisiting things when things are calmer and when emotions are calmer, so you can talk it out.
I heard your mother say the 2-time rule. I really, really like that.
Yeah.
Right now I'm feeling, really attacked. And, if the next time that you yell at me, I'm just going to have to hang up the phone.
Yeah.
And then you really have to do it the next time they yell at you.
Yeah, and that's a great way, because then you're given the expectation that, first of all, you're saying that this well, I guess we'll just go over the 2 times rule really quickly. The 2 times rule is, you can use this with adults, you can use this with children, but the first thing you do is you let the other party know that this behavior is wrong or is not something you want. The next thing you do is you tell them the second thing you do is you tell them what's going to happen the next time they do that behavior. Like you just mentioned, you said, next time I will be hanging up the phone. And then the next time it happens after that, you just follow through and you don't engage. And we're getting other questions about this. I'm just conscious of the time. There are a few other, I guess, points I wanted to, I guess, because this talk, I guess, is more focused on individuals dealing with anger management as opposed to helping someone with anger management, which could be a whole other topic.
So I'm just scrolling back. So boundaries. So we actually have a live saved on YouTube. Rachel Tuffman did one on boundaries.
Cool. Yeah.
So if somebody wants to watch that, because that's really important. So there's one. I think the video quality is bad, but listen to it like a podcast, and you'll be fine. So if you want to know more about boundaries, that's a good one.
Because that's a whole other topic, and that's very important. But
and I think we should do another one because it's a very extensive.
There's a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then workplace. What if it's in a workplace with a colleague? Are you talking about anger management or boundaries? We'll probably like.
Yeah.
It seems like a boundary question.
Boundaries, yeah.
So watch the boundary live, and then if you still have questions, private message us, and then we can maybe do another live at some point on that topic more.
Yeah.
Oh, both anger. If somebody's yelling at you, are we gonna address that? Like if somebody is angry towards you, how to deal with that?
I think that's what we're talking about, but that goes into a different topic. Right now, I'm looking at kind of the individual themselves dealing with anger, but it could totally be worth doing another one on this about how to respond to someone with anger. Yeah,
that is a whole other topic because that's really just boundaries. So watch the boundaries live, and then send any questions that you might have to Shlomo afterwards, after you watch the live.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just looking at. There's plenty more to talk about, which we won't get to all of it tonight. Something I wanted to talk about was relaxation training, because that is super helpful in anger management. So relaxation training is basically learning techniques that you can use to physically calm yourself down. So anger is a very emotional response. It's it's your body getting pumped full of adrenaline, and it's it's all about moving really fast and moving explosively or in a very emotional way, or which emotions you feel also very physically. So anything we can do to slow that down will give us some more space and help us make a decision in the short term that will be better for our long term, or for our long term. So relaxation training can be anything from breathing techniques, which are really cliched in anger management. And part of the problem with breathing techniques being cliched is everyone kind of knows that they should breathe when they're feeling angry, but they don't exactly, very often people don't exactly, they think they're breathing, but they're not actually using the breathing technique. So breathing is more than just taking a breath and maybe huffing or puffing, that kind of approach. Breathing is more of an intentional practice where you're breathing in a very specific way. there's lots of different breathing techniques. One of my favorite ones is just so easy, is something called coherence breathing. And all you do is you breathe in through your nose, you breathe out through your nose. You breathe in for an adult about 5 seconds in, and you breathe 5 seconds out, and you just keep doing that you can do it as little as 1 or 2 minutes, and it just calms down the whole nervous system. Kids can do breathing too. Kids are not going to use breathing techniques the same way as adults would, because let's be honest, breathing techniques can be pretty boring. So for kids, if you want to teach them the breathing techniques, you just got to make it more fun. So something you can do with kids is you can do something like for like younger kids, you can do something called cookie breathing. You just hold your hands next to your nose and just imagine that you're breathing in the smell of a cookie, and then breathing that in, breathing that out, and the same kind of idea. You're just making it more fun for kids. So there's things like breathing techniques. There's things like mindfulness, which we touched upon. There's things like progressive muscle relaxation, which is a really, really great one for tension and anger. We don't have time to cover it, but you can Google it. Again, it's called progressive muscle relaxation. And I will mention that I'm not sure if this live is being saved, but I will do a write-up kind of on the key points that we spoke about here. And I'll be up on my website later this week. So actually,
it will be saved, and
okay.
Hopefully. I mean,
okay.
There's on the rare occasion it doesn't work, but
yeah.
And all of our lives are on our YouTube channel.
Oh, cool.
And
okay.
if you want to send me the key points, I can put it in the bio of the...
Awesome. Okay, so I'll do that as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I also just thought of something. If anyone else wants to know more about boundaries, Esther Schwartz did a live with Rabbi Chase Taub, and it's on our YouTube channel also.
Oh, cool.
About boundaries with parents.
Nice.
So that one's a hard one. So if anyone wants to hear more about that too, you can look on our YouTube channel.
Okay, cool. Great.
Yeah.
So progressive muscle relaxation. Relaxation techniques can be really great, but it's important to know how to use them in an anger management plan. So in a high anger scenario, it's not really realistic to just start deep breathing. Whilst, let's say you're having an argument with someone, it doesn't really work to just start deep breathing or those kinds of things. So it's really important to, first of all, practice these things when you're already calm. Practice them on a regular basis. First of all, that will just keep your stress levels lower and make you feel more relaxed on a general basis. And then it means also when you need to pull it out, you're more able to pull it out. It's not just learning breathing on the spot. But the other thing is, in high anger scenarios, you can't do it. Like at a level 10 anger, it's not going to happen. So you want to use breathing techniques or relaxation techniques at a lower level anger, like a 3 or 4, or maybe even a 5, and use it before you get overworked up or in a bad spot. And that also means it's really important for you to be tracking, when you're starting to get angry, and recognize your own triggers and signs that you're starting to get, triggered and angry. So that way you can pay attention to that and know when you need to pull it out.
Oh, that can also be a tough one, by the way.
So triggers, yeah.
Because I never used to know that I was angry in my brain.
Okay.
I would feel like back tension or back pain, and in my brain I didn't know I was angry, but my back.
Cool. Yeah.
And then eventually I realized that back pain was really
tension.
Was really tension from being angry and not really figuring.
Cool.
It took me a while to figure that out.
Yeah. So one technique for becoming more aware of triggers is mindfulness. Mindfulness, again, is a whole topic in and of itself, but mindfulness is about, one part of mindfulness is about learning how to feel the body and become more aware of different body sensations. So practicing mindfulness techniques, specifically, if anyone wants to Google it, the body scan, which is a mindfulness practice, can help you get more in touch with the different things that are coming up and help you be able to start recognizing when you need to use a technique. Something else that you can do is you can do this at any time that you're calm, which is probably most of the time, and just take a piece of paper and just write out the different situations that you're in where you get angry or have an angry response, and just write them all out, and then go through them and see if you can recognize different patterns of what's happening there. And that can give you a bit of a clue of, to a situation where you're likely to get worked up, and you can plan for that better. For example, like if you know that, you're going to walk into the kitchen, you'll see the kitchen's all messy, and that's going to get you really upset, then you know that before you go into the kitchen, a place like that, you've got to use some tools to ground yourself, so you can deal with the situation in a way that will be healthy for you long term.
So like, for example, like when you're going into the kitchen, it's going to be a mess, or you're walking your house and your kids are like,
that's a great one. After a long day of work, you come home, the kids are going to be there and doing their thing.
Like a few quick pointers of like ideas.
Yeah, one I heard is literally called doorknob meditation. Before you even open the front door, you put your hand on the door, and you just take a few mindful breaths in and out, and you think of the kind of parent you want to be, and when you open the door, you're gonna get greeted by the usual stuff, and you can bring that intention in a little bit more.
That's a good one.
Yeah. So I'm just mindful of the time because this can go on all night. Should we begin wrapping it up?
You could also share, throughout the week, maybe a few.
Oh yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, because there's other stuff that I didn't get to tonight, but I'll share them through post this week.
Yeah. And we'll share them so that anyone who's following can learn some more pointers.
Right. Okay. Perfect. And one thing I guess that we were going to talk about before we wrapped up was my breakdancing group that I'm working on. So I don't know if anyone has seen, I guess, some of the posting today, but in addition to doing psychotherapy, I also teach breakdancing. So I'm currently in the process, because I've gotten lots of requests for it, and because also it's a really good idea, of developing a breakdance. We just got lost in there. Oops, that's a bad stand. Of developing a group that's going to combine breakdancing with self-regulation skills for kids, so that kids have a way of learning self-regulation, ways to calm down, ways to deal with challenges in a very structured environment with dance. So I'm really excited about it. I've got a lot of requests for it. I actually currently do have a wait list for it. So if it will be in Toronto, Ontario. So if anyone is interested in that idea, you can just send me off an email or a direct message. I can add you to the wait list. And you can get my email on my page. Visit my website. I'll have some more information on that later this week on my website, hopefully. So I'm very excited about that. So if anyone's interested, just reach out.
And I can personally attest that my son really, really, really liked the breakdancing.
Yeah.
And it's a great way to get them to start problem solving and thinking outside the box a little bit of.
Yeah.
I like what you said earlier about that.
Yeah. And kids love it because they're not doing therapy.
Right. They think they're not doing therapy.
Exactly.
We should come up ways to trick us into having therapy.
Right. That is true as well. Yeah.
Yeah, if anyone could think of some ideas.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess that's it. Any questions before we wrap up?
Anyone? Should I scroll and make sure that we address everything? Are you saving this live? Yes, we are.
Boundary questions. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a few boundary
Yeah.
videos you can watch on our YouTube channel, but maybe we'll talk about that another time in one of the lives. Yeah, a lot of boundary questions, which are really relevant.
Yeah.
But it's a whole other topic.
It is.
Yeah. No, I think that's it.
Okay.
I think we got everything.
All right. Okay. And I guess a last plug. I provide psychotherapy for individuals, for adults, teens, and children. You can visit my website, which is on my page, shlomoradcliffe.ca, if you want to learn more. And yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
All right. Thank you so much for coming on. And, I can't wait to see more posts.
All right.
1
Thank you
minute
so much.
calmer.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Okay.
Have a good night.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.